Parasaurolophus, the face of Hadrosauridae, and probably Ornithopoda too. And for a good reason. Its tube-shaped crest doesn't go unnoticed and gives it a unique and iconic look. Well, let's start from the beginning. What is Parasaurolophus? And what does Parasaurolophus mean? It's an ornithopod, specifically an hadrosaurid, more specifically a lambeosaurin, and even more specifically a parasaurolophine. The name means near-crested lizard, because when it was discovered, it was thought to be closely related to the crested lizard, Saurolophus, which, yes, it actually is, but it was later found to be more closely related to genera such as Lambeosaurus and Corythosaurus. It lived in North America, maybe Asia, but I'll get to it later, from around 76 to 72 million years ago during the Campanian stage. Seemed it didn't last that long, but that's actually something common in sexually selected species. It was a facultative biped, well, like every other hadrosaur. How do we know that? Because of fossil trackways showing a hadrosaur walking bipedally. It is generally thought that hadrosaurs ran bipedally and walked quadrupedally, but maybe, at least in Parasaurolophus's case, it could also run quadrupedally, given the strong forelimb muscles. The head of Parasaurolophus, like that of other Lambeosaurines, was narrow, suggesting a more selective diet. What really stands out about the head, though, was this bony crest. Parasaurolophus is distinguishable by said crest. It was hollow and so well preserved in the holotype that we can actually get a pretty accurate reconstruction of what it sounded like. Take a look, or rather, take a hear. It was primarily an extension of the premaxillae, while the nasals formed the bottom part of the crest. It was very, very likely employed in communication, species recognition, and display. But in the past, different hypotheses, such as its use as a snorkel, an anchor point for soft tissue, like you see in a lot of old representations, or for sound-based combat, and even fire breathing, I'm not joking, it was an hypothesis. Of course, the crest did not develop until adulthood. This is confirmed by a fossil of a juvenile, where it looks more like a bump, so it probably wasn't developed up until the animal reached sexual maturity. It's unlike any other hadrosaur, and is used as the main tool to separate the three species, those being P. walkeri, P. tubicen, and P. cetocristatus. The first is the type species, the one you always see, you know? Walkeri was found in the Dinosaur Park Formation in Canada, sharing its habitat with household names such as the ankylosaurs Euoplocephalus and Edmontonia. Other hadrosaurs like Lambeosaurus, Parasaurolophus, and Corythosaurus, theropods like Dromaeosaurus, Daspletosaurus, and Gorgosaurus, and ceratopsians like Styracosaurus and Cryptarchus. The former, Chasmosaurus russelli. Tubicen instead had a larger, broader, and straighter crest than Walkeri, and lived in what is now the Kirtland Formation, alongside animals like Zyapelta, Critosaurus, Titanoceratops, and there was also an indeterminate tyrannosaurid Tyrannosaurin lurking around. Cetocristatus, like the name suggests, had a shorter downward curved crest. Some think it represents a female individual rather than its own species. However, paleontologists are pretty confident that it is, in fact, its own species. It also lived in New Mexico in the Fruitland Formation, and in the Kirtland Formation alongside Tubicen. There is also Carinosaurus, a genus known from Maastrichtian Asia and fairly fragmentary. In fact, we don't know what the crest looked like. It is confirmed that it's a Parasaurolophine, so as you may see, it's always represented with a nearly identical crest to Parasaurolophus. But more recent studies place it closer to Tlatolophus, something prehistoric kingdom took into account when remodeling it. This was a well-muscled animal. The neck, for example, unlike what it was believed before, was quite beefy. A study conducted in 2020 determined that the neck muscle would attach to the 6th and 7th vertebrae, so it would look more like this that I drew. Speaking of vertebrae, you must be familiar with this subtle shape found in the holotype. The same study that found where the neck muscle attachment sites were also determined that the 7th and 8th vertebrae were pathologically deformed. And what is the most likely explanation? A heavy object, maybe a tree, fell across the animal's back, fracturing those spines, and they eventually healed in this shape. Furthermore, it can be said that the injury happened where the neck ligament supporting the head ended and the ossified tendon began, so the spines behind the 8th moved backwards more than we would expect. Meanwhile, the spine in front of the 7th fused with it, creating the ossification of the base of the nuchal ligament. The vertebrae are also pretty tall, like any other hadrosaur. Sometimes they appear exaggerated, like in Dinosaur King. We know, thanks to Corythosaurus and Edmontosaurus, that Hadrosaurus were semi-ungular-grade, meaning they walked on the tips of their toes, basically their nails, as opposed to digitigrade, which means walking on your digits. That sounds unpleasant, but don't worry, they weren't going through hell while walking. They had soft tissue pads under each rear limb's toe and one under the sole. In the forelimbs at least, finger 3 and 4 were encased in the foot, and it had these hoof-like structures akin to Edmontosaurus. The tail was stiff and muscular, used to support and counterbalance the weight of the animal. Speaking of weight, it's time for size estimates. The holotype of P. walkeri was 9.5 meters long and would have weighed around 4.5 to 5 tons. But we also have CMN 52845, a specimen assigned to walkeri known from very fragmentary remains. And scaling from the holotype, we get a dinosaur that was at least 11.3 meters long and weighed 7 to 8 tons. We also have estimates as low as 7.5 meters and 3 tons. Hubison is considered to be the largest of the 3 species. The few specimens we do have indicate sizes between 10.5 and 12 meters and a weight of 6 to 9 tons. Too bad we can't be too sure about it though, since they're partial skulls. And then there is Certocristatus. This one is complicated. The holotype seems to be anywhere from 9.5 to 10.5 meters and 4 to 5.5 tons. Estimates as low as 8.5 meters and 4 tons for other individuals exist, as well as higher ones, such as BYU 2467, likely a P. certocristatus, is estimated at around 11 meters and 7 tons. UMNHVP 16666.1 is a piece of skull assigned to this species and should reach 13 meters and 10.5 to 11.5 tons. There is also MNAP.1529, a large femur whose estimates place it at 13 to 13.5 meters and around 12.5 to 13 tons. And maybe it could get even bigger. NMMNHP 63032 is known from only a footprint, but if it was actually a Certocristatus, it would mean this species could be gigantic, well over 15 meters and 18 tons. Take the last estimate with a grain of salt, as it is the largest footprint assigned to Corichnium, an ichnogenus. But we can always keep the cope up. There are also skin impressions on Parasaurolophus, showing the skin was pretty thin. This was the same as other hadrosaurs. We are actually lucky enough to have impressions from 10 hadrosaur species. We even know the pattern of some of them, like Brachylophosaurus, Saurolophus, and Edmontosaurus, but not the color, unfortunately. But we can speculate on that. For instance, Parasaurolophus was a show-off. It is pretty much guaranteed that its crest was the result of sexual selection. Same goes for other Mambiasaurines. In light of this, Parasaurolophus was likely colorful, and even more likely is sexual dimorphism. Maybe the female had duller color and a smaller crest. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.